So how much is likely to change in terms of numbers? That's, of course, going to be the key question. How much of the election impact are we likely to see on the budget? There is, of course, this clamor that perhaps the government will do much more as far as welfareism is concerned. What could that translate into? All of these will be the issues that we will take up. We were meant to do this at 3:30, but as is the case with live TV, we're ready to go whenever we get the cue. But since there's been a change of plans here at the National Council, we will go live at 2:30 on CNBC TV 18 across our digital platforms and on television as well. So feel free to retweet and tweet. We're just waiting by, I think it's about 4 minutes to go before we start, and we will get things going. And I hope that you will make this a little bit provocative as well and not say only polite things. Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV 18 CII Budget Town Hall. I'm Shireen Bhan, and it is our absolute privilege to be here as part of the CII's National Council meeting. If you just see the scenario behind me, and we've got plenty of cameras here focusing on what is going on. You've got a packed house here, CEOs representing different sectors, different industries here to give us a sense of where things stand as far as the economy is concerned, but more importantly, what they believe the budget will deliver on, what the expectations are from a historic budget, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be the 7th budget that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presents, and this will be the first for any finance minister, 7 consecutive budgets of history in the making. Will the budget live up to that expectation or not? As the interim budget showed, and it was a very short 56-minute speech that the finance minister delivered, the government intends to continue on the path that has already been set out over the last 2 terms. The question now is, will there be any change in track? Will there be a difference in the government's approach as far as priorities are concerned? Well, it's also interesting and important to note that the government goes into this budget with a very comfortable fiscal position. In fact, the CNBC TV 18 analysis shows that approximately 1 lakh crore rupee cushion, if not higher, is available to the government since the interim budget was presented, on account of the fact that you've got a 2.1 lakh crore rupee dividend bonanza that's coming from the Reserve Bank of India. And you've also seen a significant increase as far as tax collections are concerned, 30,000 crore rupees higher than what was the number as far as the interim budget is concerned. But without further ado, let me go across to Sanjeev Puri, the president of CII. Mr. Puri, before we talk about the budget, let's talk about the mood here at CII. As I pointed out, you've got different sectors being represented here. What is the mood as we go into this budget? How buoyant, how optimistic, how confident is corporate India feeling about demand, about growth?
So I think the mood is quite positive. It's optimistic, and that's reflected also in the CEO's internal surveys that we do on business confidence. It's in fact significantly higher than what it was the same period last year. So the outlook on growth, on investments and jobs is certainly positive. And it's also, the performance of the economy last year and high frequency indicators are also reflective of this trend. And of course, as you know, that nation building or economic development is always a journey. So there are lots of positives today. And the model of growth of inclusive growth, which is investment-led, empowerment-led, has, I think, certainly been validated. And I think that journey should continue, because economic development is always a journey. And of course, there are additional areas that would need to be addressed as we go forward. Overall, very optimistic, I would say.
Very optimistic is the mood at this point in time. But specifically as far as consumption is concerned, and I link this to the rural economy as well, Mr. Puri, what's the sense that you get on consumption? I mean, FMCG volume growth, for instance, has not kept pace with the kind of GDP, headline GDP number that we've seen. And that has raised questions on why we're seeing this divergence or dissonance. How do you read that?
No, that is true. As I said, there are still areas to be addressed. And we have to also, when we come to consumption, I think it's also important to step back and look at it from a global perspective. Consequent to COVID, we have seen the cost table, and a lot of it because of external factors has actually gone up. And because of that, there is a challenge on normal economies. You will find that it has shrunk and not even come back to pre-COVID levels. In India, well, we are comparatively better off. We are not what we would like it to be, but we are better off. And we are now questioning the rate of growth. The rate of growth is muted. That's the question in our minds. And you're right, that is the reality. So what are the ways to attend to this? I think first of all, as far as rural is concerned, given that cost of everything has gone up, what CII is recommending is that the amounts through direct benefit transfer, the amounts through Manrega and income tax at the lower end, below 20 lakhs, there should be some relief in, and all the other areas should be increased. As far as infra spends are concerned, we are also talking about, putting greater indexation to spends in the rural area. Then, of course, to solve the rural angle on a more sustainable basis, the issues of both agriculture and empowerment of rural economy through skilling, etc. Which skilling, of course, is a joint responsibility that industry also has a role to play there. I think that has to be addressed. And as far as agriculture is concerned, I think a lot of policies of collectives, technologies, clusters, they're all the right tools. We have to scale this up and very aggressively start working on building resilience, because the biggest culprit at this moment in the recent past on rural incomes has been the weather events, which are of course favorable now. So hopefully it should get much better going forward.
And we're hoping that the monsoon deficit will be bridged. But before I get Sanjeev Bajaj into the conversation, a quick headline number from you. What if you expect that volume growth will pick up? What could the industry-wide, FMCG industry-wide volume growth, average volume growth be in the second half of the year?
No, that's difficult. That's difficult to answer.
That's why I said industry, not pinning you down to ITC.
No, even for the industry to put a number is very difficult. But we do expect that with the monsoons being better and the cumulative impact of all the investments that are already happening in the economy. See, private investment is also happening. Jobs are getting created. Public capex is happening, though during the the election period there's been a little lull, but it's picking up again. So all of this cumulative impact will boost consumption. It will definitely go up, but very difficult to forecast.
A number. Sanjeev, let me come to you now as far as growth and demand is concerned. The regulator, the RBI, certainly seems to be concerned about unsecured loans and unsecured lending, and we've seen several measures coming in from the regulator on the back of that. How are you seeing the landscape at this point in time, both in terms of what's happening with credit offtake, and perhaps do you believe that the industry is prepared for more regulatory action?
So the first point is, when you look at non-food bank credit, we are about 16-17%. So that is gradually growing, and that's a positive. Where it comes to small value unsecured loans, we saw a significant growth in this in the last couple of years. And I believe that the RBI has taken the right steps in trying to control that. I believe that associated with it, we've also seen in the F&O market significant increase in small value transactions in the last couple of years, which means part of this money could be used for speculative purposes, and that does not help anybody in the short to medium term. So some of these checks and controls are required, but at the same time, the regulators, we know, have an equal role to support growth as well. Let's hope for a good monsoon. We are starting to see better growth in rural India, at least in our businesses, compared to the last 4 or 5 quarters. The last quarter has been better. But yes, we need to get this cycle of growth of private next level of acceleration.
Any concerns around, what we are seeing, for instance, as far as MFIs are concerned, concerns building around NPAs, around delinquencies, any concerns that NBFCs at this point in time are seeing? Any signs?
At an MFI level, well, our own presence is negligible there, but I don't see or hear of a sector level issue. If it's an individual company issue, it could be.
Okay, so your big expectation from the budget, I know there's a long wish list that's been sent in to the finance minister. But if I were to ask you to taper that down to the top three, what would those be?
The first, very clearly as India, we are in a position where we have a significant chance over the next 5-10 years to partake in a larger part of the global economy. Our last 5 years have seen the early benefits of schemes like the PLI scheme. There have been some mistakes along the way also which need to be corrected. I hope we see a version 2 of that. And while we know the budget is for the year, but I hope there's a direction for the next 5 years. What industry needs is a clear glide path of what to expect over, say, the next 5, even 10 years, so that they can invest with confidence. Second, around jobs, having jobs and skilling. We were just talking to somebody over lunch, and you can't get people because most people have gone home. And how do you get them back? I think this is another big challenge for industry. Third is around skilling. And I know the government is doing a lot as private sector.
Gone
we work with
home,
them.
meaning gone home for what reason? For on account of the elections, or
Gone home for elections, gone home because...
or do they
over the
not
last-
feel? I mean, there is enough opportunity back home, and hence they don't feel the need to be here.
So, post-COVID, what has happened is partly the additional amount of money that came into their hands when they needed it at that time, going back and living in those means, we believe that a lot of people have just got used to that. And bringing them back into the city is taking a disproportionate effort. But that needs to be done. How can the government support industry for doing that? We also know that very often for industry, there's a gap in skilling between what you learn out of college and what's required at work. Now, each of these are areas where work has been done.
Right.
Question is, how do you turbocharge this to the next level?
Okay, so that's interesting. So you're saying schemes like the free food scheme, etc., are now providing enough of a cushion that people are considering staying back in villages as opposed to coming to cities looking for a job. That's an interesting point that you make, Sanjeev Bajaj. But let me get Mr. Mukundan into the conversation as well, because Sanjeev also alluded to the PLI schemes, and we have 13 PLI schemes in operation. As part of the 100-day agenda, we're given to understand that from a manufacturing perspective, the government could perhaps be looking at even additional schemes, new schemes, not PLI, but things like medical device manufacturing, etc. What would industry be hoping for that this budget takes forward?
So, Shireen, I think rather than get into PLI straight away, let me go to the broader issue which you raised. I think I've traveled to almost 15 cities in the last 1 month, part of CII, met the members. There are 4 issues which comes again and again whenever you go. One is the jobs issue, second is the skill issue, which I think Sanjeev alluded to. And then there's an issue which MSME is raising in terms of, that demand and how do we sort of support them. And while that support is there, I think we need to look at the broader environment and say, how do we link it to our trade policy? How do we enable them to serve the world market? I think that 4 key pivots have to be done. Don't just rely on Indian market demand growth, but rely on our connectivity to the world, become part of the global supply chain. And in that, PLI has a big role.
Right.
I think we got to link it to those sectors which are going to be very, very strategic in becoming part of the global supply chain. Put your money there and then enable the MSME to become part of the value chain. It creates jobs. But of course, the skill issue, the government has done a lot, in my view. If you look at the new NCVT guidelines, the credit guidelines which have come out, but they have just come out about a month or 2 before. We need to still operationalize them. So a lot more focus on making them operational. And then getting a focus back on the general good, which is basically to say, don't cut back on your public investment.
Right.
And hold on one issue, which I think maybe will serve as at least for the next 2-3 years, this 15% income tax sunset clause.
Yeah.
If you can push it back by another couple of years, or maybe give it a 5-year push, I think it's going to play extremely well. The external environment is positive today. If you look at the environment in terms of interest rate, they're going to fall. You go look at despite all the trouble in the world, energy costs are almost flat. You can't ask for a better environment, but we now need to capitalize and move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talked about that extension as far as the 15% corporate tax rate is concerned for new manufacturing facilities. And of course, this has been part of the wish list that's been sent in. But I do want to address the issue of jobs, because we heard there from Mr. Puri, we heard from Sanjeev Bajaj, and you said it as well, that industry is feeling confident, industry is buoyant, private investment is picking up, capacity utilization, if I take a look at different sectors, is now 80-85%. So where are we going to start to see the jobs coming in from? Are we now on the cusp of significant additional capacity being set up, or is it continued to be across different sectors in different ways, Mr. Mukundan?
See, See, the jobs is a general issue you hear anyway when you meet community, people in the community. But when you meet the industry, they talk about skilled workforce. There's a shortage. So what we are saying is there's a mismatch. We need to bridge the mismatch. And the only way we're going to do that is focusing even more on skill building, that the people who need jobs can get the right skills to come and work productively. I think that's the thing we need to solve for. The framework exists, but how do companies take this up more vigorously, as Sanjeev said, is one of the key issues.
Okay, CB, I want to come to you now and address the issue of what you believe the finance minister is likely to take up, or what is likely, what is feasible. And one of the big concerns, or one of the big questions in everybody's mind, is that whether there will be any change as far as the capital gains tax regime is concerned. I know we have a lot of tax experts here in this room as well, but CB, what's industry's expectation? What's industry's view on this? You just have to put the microphone closer to you.
Yeah, thanks, Shri. No, I think on capital gains, what we have actually said is basically for simplification. There are a number of rates, it's much complex at this point in time. So our suggestion has been mainly around a recommendation, mainly around simplification. But that's as far as capital gains is concerned. But really speaking, our focus has been much on certain areas, which is taking it on from there. There's a lot being done on decriminalization, a lot being done on ease of doing business, but I think there needs to be much more focus on decrim, especially for the small and the mid-sized companies. That's one. Second, we've also talked about something, which is like an ease of doing business, the national single window scheme, say, for instance, that really becoming much more of a single window in terms of the states.
When we've talked about this previously as well, over years and years and years, does it matter whether you have a central level single window? Because at the end of the day, most of your regulatory approvals, your licenses, etc., come at the state level, and a lot of states have actually moved on single window clearances already.
Yeah. A lot of states have moved on single window clearances, but there are a lot more to be done at the state level, and the issue is state level. And so therefore, a lot of our reforms today are also at the state level, whether it is power, land, labor. So we've also talked about really this budget giving a roadmap. Much of it cannot be in the budget, but even a sort of a signal on how the GST-like collaborations that has happened with the states could be even taken forward in these areas. These mean a lot for when we hear Mukundan talking about jobs. Jobs are really going to come from the mid-size and the small companies, and unless we make it easier for them to operate, we are always going to see that lag. So lastly, I think staying on the jobs, we have suggested something like you talked about PLI, we've talked about an ELI, an employment linked.
And this is not the first time CII suggested an ELI. So you're hoping that this time around the finance minister will take that forward. But I will come back to the ELI question in just a second. But let me go across to Vinayak Chatterjee, because Mr. Mukundan also spoke about how, and Sanjeev spoke about the fact that government capex should continue to be driven. You were disappointed with the number in the interim budget. I remember that very, very distinctly, because you were sitting with me when the announcement came in, Vinayak. What's the expectation this time around? Do you believe that, and many estimates do believe that perhaps there's been a plateauing now, and we cannot expect the government to continue to throw significantly higher numbers on public capex. What's the expectation?
Just the reverse.
The mic. Yes. Go ahead.
This is on now.
Yeah.
Just the reverse of what you said. First, to clarify on the interim budget, I had no expectations because it was an interim holding operation, some kind of an arithmetical exercise. So let that pass. The important point on the outlays is in the starting of the meeting, the remark was made, I think Sanjeev Puri made the remark that in terms of fiscal space, whether it is the buoyancy of revenue, of GST revenue collections, or the extra amount received from the RBI, the government is actually sitting on the fiscal space where it can actually not hold back, but do more. The macroeconomic maths is very clear. The government shared last year in interactions with you, a very, very senior functionary, I won't take the name because you know.
I know who you mean, yes.
Shared the fact that they have a confidential report that says that rupees spent on public works or infrastructure results in 3 rupees of GDP, whereas 1 rupee spent on schemes of like DBT, direct benefit transfer, results in 90 paisa of GDP. So the macroeconomic maths is very clear. If they do not increase the capex spend on infrastructure by 30% this year, from 10 lakhs crores, which was the full year budget last year, to 13, which is my expectation this year, a 30% increase, consistent with the last 2 years. The last 2 years has been 25-30%. You are not going to get 8% GDP growth because with private capex still not quite taking off, it is only public expenditure and infra spends that is going to pump prime the economy. So the maths is very clear. If you don't increase the infra capex by 30%, you may not get 8% GDP growth. It's as crystal clear as that.
Okay, if the math is so clear that the government needs to continue to pump prime the economy by spending more on infrastructure and public capex, Puneet Chhatwal, what is holding back the private sector from investing more? If the mood is good, and the finance minister several times over has said, we're waiting for the private sector to unleash its animal spirits, what's holding back the animal spirits?
Shireen, I have a different opinion. I think we are doing well versus others post-COVID. So first thing we have to take into account, is there enough investment in India? The answer is yes. I just came back from Europe and I can tell you things don't look that good out there. We can do much more, as Vinayak just alluded to, in terms of infrastructure, but there are several sectors, and I definitely represent the tourism and hospitality. I think it's high time that looking at 2047 and what we call the Amrit Kal era, I think it's a great opportunity that the government has to invest in this sector because of its ability to create the significant multiplication in jobs. So what has been proven worldwide is every job created in this sector creates 8 to 12 jobs in other sectors. So I think that is... So
specifically, what would the travel, hospitality, tourism sector want from the budget?
Well, we have not said any kind of financial assistance that is needed. It's the positioning of the sector. The perception that this is luxury and discretionary has to go, because
Which comes down to GST.
Not really GST. Of course, the alignment of GST would help. A lovely, expensive standalone restaurant pays only 5% and the hotels pay 18%. I think that alignment is definitely overdue and needed. But I think giving this sector, again, coupling with what Vinayak said, the full infrastructure status would bring in a lot of investments, not only from within India, but from outside of India. And giving it an industry status at the state levels, which many states have done, will make the cost of doing business more efficient. So more and more investment will happen.
Okay, you're also in line, like I know Satish Reddy and the healthcare sector have been asking for infrastructure status, industry status for healthcare and pharma as well. John Major Sinha, let me come to you now. What's the expectation overall as far as the financial sector is concerned? Do you expect any significant announcements in this budget? And essentially, when we talk about privatization, while there is a stated policy intent to privatize, the government has not moved the legislative amendments to ensure that the banking sector does see any kind of privatization. Should we put that to rest for now?
So, on a lighter note, I must say that I caution any bank or NBFC with a high price to book. Because if they get a high price to book, the RBI is going to come after them, like HDFC, Kotak, Bajaj, etc. So I just caution them, keep your price to book low, otherwise the regulator is coming. And in terms of, financial sector, look, there are just now the overall holding of the government in public sector banks is 70%. If it was to just come down to 50%, we wouldn't have any risk. I mean, they would have the same control and there would be no, and right now the price to book is almost getting close to 1.8. So there's a lot of money out there. We can do that in stages. Of course, my wish, which has stayed unrequited, is to get them below 50 and above 26%. But that is unlikely. But there is one more thing, and I hope and pray at some point we take on at a mission level, which is water. If India collapses, it will not be because of jobs, it will be because of water. And the urgency of water is getting more and more strident. And we need an infrastructure kind of thinking on water, which we are struggling to do, of course, because it's state and center. But if we don't take it on, I really worry about the country itself.
No, you're absolutely right in pointing that out. It's not just water, but issues like pollution, etc., also need to be addressed with the same kind of urgency as we talk about tax-related matters. But Venkat, let me come to you now. On the tax front, what's the expectation? The assumption is that perhaps this will be the budget that finally the middle class will be given some relief, or at least to make the new tax regime a lot sweeter. There could be something that the government does. What's your own expectation, at least on the tax front and capital gains specifically as well? You'll have to come closer to the mic.
Well, I think that, yes, to a certain class of taxpayers, yes, there will be a little more generosity. There is absolutely no doubt. I would also be interested to see that now when the government is thinking about not the issue of sending workers out to work in other countries. Very interesting that we're looking in terms of sending people overseas to work at a point when we are also facing shortages here, as to whether they will look in terms of how they incentivize them as well. On capital gains, yes, the rumors have been around, and you always have the alarmists, especially in good times, and sometimes you just hope that the status quo then. Apart from the fact that Chandrajit did say very rightly that there is a bit of streamlining that needs to be done.
Yeah.
On infrastructure,
Do you and expect them to move on holding periods this time? Or do you believe that it might be much more of a signal saying, look, it is something that we will look at?
well, I wouldn't like to speculate, and I don't think people would want to boil the ocean at this stage, I would hope. So I actually would like us to have a larger global outlook, like even when we talked about the banks, for example, the point that Janajay makes is right. But we should also be looking at aspirations of having more meaningful banking, global banking, and insurance institutions.
Yeah.
I know there was talk about even looking in terms of professional services as to how we go more global.
Right.
But certainly, I think some incentives to make Indian companies and institutions more global would be helpful.
Okay. Well, I thought industry needs to be much more competitive to go global. But Sanjay, from a manufacturing standpoint specifically, and we've already seen the government do its fair share in terms of promoting different sectors. Are you going in with any expectations, any clarifications that you would like the government to make?
Yeah, Shireen, from the auto component sector, we've seen a lot of disruption and a lot of opportunity for growth. But I think some kind of push in the rural industry would be great for us, because we've seen a major decline in tractors, CV. We're back in that down cycle. There's not enough happening on PLI, even though PLI has been announced, and you discussed, Mukandan started talking about the PLI.
Yeah.
I think something to do with PLI where we actually see some kind of disbursement. It's been 2 years, there's been no disbursement. So there's a gap there. And then, of course, our continuous ask has been for a standard GST. And that's required.
The GST is not going to be addressed in any form or fashion in the budget. Of course, there is a need to look at rationalization as far as the GST rate structure is concerned, but that's a matter that will be considered by the GST Council and will not be up for review here in this budget. But let me bring Satish Reddy into the conversation. Satish, what's the expectation? As I said, there's talk around a new manufacturing policy for medical devices. There's, of course, this current impasse between rates and the Ayushman Bharat scheme, and there is a committee that's been set up to look into that, and there have been concerns raised by the healthcare operators. But overall, from a pharma and a healthcare perspective, what's the mood like? What are the opportunities that you believe industry wants to leverage, and what kind of facilitation do you require?
Sure. Certainly, I think there are plenty of opportunities, Shireen. So I'll start with the pharmaceutical sector because I'm more familiar with it. I think the theme has always been one of innovation, and we've been consistent about it for the past 5 years. And the expectation is, at least this time, it shouldn't just be an announcement. It should also be an intent to move the needle on innovation. Specifically, what we are saying is India has thrived being, an API manufacturer in the past.
Yeah.
It's also, done very well in generics. But when it comes to innovation, I think there's a lot of pitching in which the government has to do in terms of changing the entire ecosystem. And again, it's a lot of detail, I won't get into it, but we would like to see more of that happening, because there have been announcements being done in the past. NRF announcement of 50,000 crores, there's this 1 lakh crore
Yeah.
innovation fund coming in. But we would like to see the pharmaceutical sector R&D, if it needs to move the needle, what would actually enable that? So, that would be one big thing
Okay.
when it comes to pharmaceutical sector. Medical devices, obviously, there's a plenty of opportunity because one is on the regulation side that there is a change that's expected to happen outside of the budget, but that would actually spur the industry quite a bit. There's a concerted effort to move the medical industry to medical devices industry to also indigenize. I think that's already been.
And that is the attempt with of course already the existing PLI scheme that's out there, and with this proposed policy that we're given to understand. But I also want to understand from the pharma perspective, Satish, what's the outlook? There's been a lot of talk about Indian companies and global aspirations and competitiveness, and pharma is a sector where we have been very globally competitive. But the big market, the US market, and generics have been facing significant pricing pressure there. What's the outlook from here on as far as growth, demand, especially in markets like the US is concerned?
Sure. Specifically on the generics part, yes, there's been a concern because there's been quite a bit of decline, and that has to do with various reasons. The topmost reason being the consolidation among the buyers and the effect of that, right? That's actually caused most of the pricing to really decline and also cause shortages in the US, which I think because just about 15 days ago we were part of the CII delegation led by Mr. Dinesh, and in that delegation we actually saw an opportunity.
Okay.
And that opportunity happens to be because of the very good strategic relationship between the US and India. It also provides an opportunity on the supply chain part because they are looking at diversification of their supply chain, notably APIs, and also in relation to that, the key starting materials, the KSMs, and India would be the best alternative. So we made the pitch for that. So I actually see an opportunity coming out of it.
Okay, an opportunity. You talked about consolidation, and let me come back to the panel here and get Sanjeev Puri as well as Mr. Mukundan to comment on this, and anybody else who would like to address this issue. Are we likely to see consolidation play out more so in 2024 and 2025? Sanjeev Puri, there's been a lot of talk about conglomerates doing acquisitions in the space. Companies like yours have been out there picking up assets in the D2C space, for instance. But do you see 2025 to be a year of more consolidation? And do you think that there would be specific sectors ripe for that kind of consolidation?
Well, these are natural.
The cement sector, for instance, has seen a fair amount in the recent few weeks.
Yeah, these are natural processes that happen in businesses. There are cycles. So I won't pay too much of attention to that. Time to time they will happen. They are not linear. It's lumpy. When the opportunities are there, it will happen. So, but I think what I would really say is that you raised some point on private investment.
Yeah.
And I did hear some of my colleagues also say that it's happening. I just wanted to put a data to it. See, the private investment to GDP is now at 23.8%, which is higher than what it was pre-COVID. So investment is happening, jobs are getting created, and people are getting skilled. The point we are arguing really is about how to accelerate the trend, how to do more, because we also have a backlog of 2 years of the COVID period where all this didn't happen to catch up. The economy stalled, but people coming into the job market did not.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of accelerate? That's really the issue. And it's from that perspective that I think some of the suggestions and the next issues that have to be dealt with, like CB spoke about employment-related, schemes, and then I think the big one also CB also touched upon is the big factor reforms, land, labor, agriculture, power.
But is there expectation now on that front? Do you believe? I mean, with a full majority, we didn't move on that. Do you expect anything to happen now?
But look, if these are things that are required for the next journey of the economic transformation. So we need to find platforms and mechanisms to address it. These are issues to be addressed. So sure. I think therefore we have to have a dialogue and discussion and see what is the best form of doing it. And it's ultimately in the interest of all stakeholders. What the last several years of policy making has proven is that investment-led growth, empowerment-led growth, and a lot of reform that's happened in the center has taken us on a certain way, strong foundation. Now, a lot of the next set of things that have to happen lie at the intersection of center and state.
Yeah.
So they have to be addressed. And that is where the big opportunity for India is, and big opportunity also that is coming from the new geopolitical dynamic. So these are issues that need to be addressed, and we need to have dialogue and discussion and form consensus on it.
Fair point. There needs to be better engagement between the center and state on a whole host of these crucial issues that you raised. Ms. Mukundan, both of you have talked about the need to engage much more with the world at this point in time, given the changing geopolitical dynamics. Now, we're in the process of inking an FTA with the UK. Talks have been on. 21 rounds of negotiations have taken place. We've got a new government in the UK, so perhaps it'll take a little bit longer for this to get done. There are conversations on with the EU, etc. as well. From a geopolitical standpoint, what's the expectation that industry has? Which of the blocks that you believe would make sense strategically for India to engage with from an FTA perspective at this point in time?
Yeah, Shireen, I think let me go back to the first point which I said, which is about that one of the key elements of our growth going forward should not just be domestic, but look at trade policy and engage in a way that we can make access to markets easy for our companies. And in that, I think FTAs play a big role. I think maybe some of these FTAs have taken longer than usual, but we already signed with Australia, UAE. I think many more are in works. But we also need to sign it strategically where we can find markets. So I think already we have, for example, with Japan, Korea, engage more productively with those companies as well as the buyers in those markets to enable our companies go there. And really the opportunity, the way I see, the way Puneet sort of spoke, is that India can build forward better because 60% of India is yet to be built.
Yeah.
And we need to build it sustainably. We need to build it with competitive enterprises and with skilled manpower. And finally, we have to do this in a very inclusive manner. I think that's what the budget should be looking at. All the building blocks, every year build a little bit more so that we reach that destination.
Well, speaking of building a little bit more, Mr. Sriram, as far as the agri-economy is concerned, and we've got various nuggets that have come in from many participants who've already spoken, but given where we find ourselves today, and I think the obvious one is the PM Kisan installments should be enhanced, at least indexed for inflation, etc. Outside of that, what are the specifics that you would like to see to take forward from what Mr. Mukundan said, the government to build on as far as the agri-economy is concerned?
Thanks, Shireen. I think agriculture is where majority of India lives, and the requirement to put in effort to increase the income of people in the agricultural area is very crucial. I think one of the areas where this can happen very well and quick is by having a strong collaboration between corporates and farmers. I really think the 3 laws which were unfortunately shelved, they were good laws. They're good for the farmer. I'll give an example. We are in the sugar industry. We are seeing how 98% of the money we pay for the price of sugarcane goes directly to the farmer. There are no middlemen. So I think that's a great advantage. If one can have a tie-up for food processing in a structured manner with the farmers, and corporates have been told, should be told, you can't pay below the MSP.
Yeah.
You are assuring an income. And the second part of corporates getting involved, if I may take a second to give an example, we help the farmer grow sugarcane. Average yield is about 70 tons per hectare. We've had a farmer who had an output of 275 tons per hectare with a net profit of 6 lakhs per hectare. That's the collaborative effort which can go in. So I think there's a lot of work which can go on this side, which is good. One more area of agriculture, if I may say so, which requires attention, which Janmajay also mentioned, is the issue of water. I think water is being wasted. 80% of the water is used in agriculture. We need to have some pricing. Anything free is misused. So as a suggestion, now that we have direct benefit transfer going across, charge for the electricity used for water, pay it based on the electric pump used, rather than giving it free. We've seen in some states with electricity free and water free, what's happening. I think we need to do something there also.
Well, that again is not going to be part of what the budget can prescribe, but of course it's a larger issue that needs to be addressed, and not just for water, but across a whole aspect of other services provided. But Mr. Sriram, you talked about the sugar FRP, for instance. Now, as far as many changes that we've seen, we've seen onion exporters, for instance, cry horse about the fact that there have been many changes that the government imposes, bans are imposed, and so on and so forth. What is it that you believe the government needs to send out in terms of messaging as well as articulation of its policy when we talk about stability of prices?
I think pricing has to be reasonable to the farmer. There's no question. The second reality is someone has to pay. If you're giving the farmer a better price, someone has to pay. This is where I think the approach of having a collaboration with corporates for food processing can help, where you can get even onions in the dried format, in a dried form through processing, which can be used in the off season. So you can actually capitalize on this by giving the benefit to the farmer across the board. But I think a pricing has to be reasonable, has to be balanced. And I think the government is already giving free food, etc., to 80 crore people.
Yeah.
They're getting the benefit. They have to pay for something. I think there has to be a balance between that.
Well, yes, that balance that you spoke of. Let me get Swati Salgaonkar and Devjani Ghosh into the conversation. Swati, you've been, of course, dealing with what industry wants specifically as far as the Western region is concerned. Again, what are the pain points? What are the points of friction today that need to be addressed?
So I think something we've been looking at the Western region is actually inclusive growth and really looking at women in the workforce. And I think the interim budget talked about, certain incentives, although it wasn't very clear, talked about women empowerment. And what we're really seeing is, we're looking at it at a holistic level. So in terms of education, how do you look at STEM education, in fact, for women? How do you get more women in those industries as well? But more importantly, how do you get them to stay in the workforce? Because I think while we talk about, what we want our GDP to be, if you see where we are in terms of women in the workforce, I think we're towards the bottom of the G20 countries. So that's really something we've been focusing on and looking at women in leadership as well. Now, this is not something that will directly be addressed by the budget, but I think it's time we started looking at it, at a broader level. Similarly, I think, Mr. Reddy spoke about innovation. That's something we're looking at as well, in legacy industry, because I think while the government, again, I think it was 1 lakh crore that was announced for innovation, but we really need to look at how this takes place, not just at a government level, but also at a corporate industry level as well. And there again, I think we're lagging way behind the rest of the world.
Yes, and I think that we need more details on how that's going to be operationalized. But as far as, bringing more women into the workforce, and I do want to, broaden this. I don't want to make this just Swati's issue. I want to address the CEOs in this room on that issue, because I know that it has become a C-suite challenge that many have decided to take up. And if anybody here who would like to address the issue, if you could raise your hands, what are you doing to try and bring more women into the workforce? Why do you believe it's important or necessary? Why do you think it's important and necessary to actually diversify your workforce, make it much more inclusive, bring in more gender parity? What the experience has been and the efforts in trying to do that? What are the big challenges and constraints that you face? Anyone here who would like to take this issue up? Yes, go ahead. You've got the microphone.
I think one important thing they can address is identify data, school dropouts, school finishers, ideal women, particularly in rural.
Yeah, yes.
3 million people, boys and girls.
Okay, so data, of course, is a concern that we have across different sectors, but you're saying try and see what states like Tamil Nadu, etc., have done. Kamal Bali, specifically from a perspective of EVs, etc., the FAME scheme, which is again up for renewal or review. What's the expectation? What is it that you would like to see the government do? We've also seen, some states consider moving on hybrids. A state like UP has already moved on that, even though the policy was rolled out in 2022, but has only now been brought into execution. What's the overarching message that industry wants to send out to the government when it comes to electric vehicles, hybrid technology, and the facilitation industry wants?
Shirin, if I were to step back and to say what today is the biggest opportunity for India, to my mind, manufacturing is the biggest opportunity. Because also, if you look at it in perspective, manufacturing is still very small. We are only 16% of our GDP. And if you look at countries like Germany, Korea, China, Japan, these medium to large economies, it's manufacturing which has anchored these economies for a long time. So it's very important that India also gets So what is it holding us back in manufacturing? Because the needle hasn't moved much over the last 15, 20 years on the share of manufacturing in our GDP. So I personally believe there are three things I think we need to look at. I think number one is the domestic ecosystem, where we are looking at ease of doing business, cost of doing business. There are a number of things which we need to talk about, whether taxes, simplification, dispute resolution, number of things are there. The second piece is firm level competitiveness, which is how can we make our companies competitive in this world. You know, there are a number of things, and there I think CII can play a huge role in making on a mission mode, taking these things to the MSME level and other things. And the third piece, which Mukundan also alluded to, is the global ecosystem, where we have market access, FTAs, brand India, all of that. I think if we look at in this, and I think this is a great opportunity. And just coming back to your question, very, very clearly, EV and India can become actually the manufacturing hub for green transition, because through green hydrogen, ammonia, electromobility, these can all be, these are new areas where PLIs can come in, and India can take lead in some of these. And I think we can give a fresh look to manufacturing in our country. And I think manufacturing is going to solve many other related issues of employment, of skilling, of job creation, and all of that. So to my mind, that's going to be one important thing. And we will have to look at it in a holistic way, and look at manufacturing with a new mindset.
I want to quickly get all the manufacturing CEOs in on this. Nikhil, very quickly weigh in on this. What is it that you believe is the urgent ask at this point in time? Just the one thing that you believe the government needs to focus on. I'll get Ashish and Deepak to comment as well.
On the lines of what Kamal had just said, I think a focus on the energy transition as a sector by itself, specifically because it's a $100 trillion global opportunity over the next 25 odd years, for us to be able to not only transition ourselves, but to cater to the world's transition from a manufacturing perspective of capital goods is extremely important. So what I would expect from the government is a vision in this budget, which allows a rollout of how they view the transition itself with regulations. And it may actually come to the fact that we need a specific energy budget going forward, because we seem to view energy only with Renewable Energy Ministry or Power Ministry. But in fact, actually, there may be 7 or 8 different ministries which handle this, and there may be a need to consolidate the ministries at a level so that we can have a uniform regulation.
Well, that's an important point that you make. Deepak, you want to come in on that, and then I'll get Ashish.
I think you made a very good point on gender parity and gender diversity. And here, manufacturing is having labor shortage, but we haven't really tapped the gender to actually come in a lot more female basically employment. I think if government is able to incentivize that and make those policies around it, and it's world over now in China, I mean, so you see
But
this.
what kind of incentives do you believe the government needs to put on the table?
So just, I mean, say you can actually have kind of a corporate tax, or you can have a target that if a company is using that much on the shop floor, you probably get some tax incentive. It could be anything which actually incentivize on policy matters and the corporate to actually employ more.
But are you not hiring women because of the lack of incentive, or you're not hiring women because it's harder to hire women?
It's a mindset change which is required.
Yes,
it's a mindset change which is required, and actually it's also the women needs to have more empowerment to actually do manufacturing jobs. And as the manufacturing is changing into high skill, high labor, high electronics, you're seeing more and more women employment. But I'm saying as a general case, SMEs, MSMEs, you don't get that many people as employers. As a manufacturing, you need to strengthen that and make sure that there's just one point.
No, it's an important point, and I think it's a point that we need to address. Yes, sir, go ahead. You've got the mic right next to you. Go ahead.
Let me share my experience in our electronic company in Udaipur, where we hired 3,000 people. We took up a target to convert the workforce to 60% women, starting at 5%. We had to go to the tribal areas, serious social objection within their families, but to unhinge them, bring them to the city of Udaipur. Today, that workforce is 40%. And we are on target to get to 60%.
Well, that does deserve a round of applause, sir. We hope that you do get to 60%.
So, Deepak, I can't agree with you on incentive. It's all in the mind. Second point, under industrial law, women are not allowed to work in chemical industry. But we took this up because we have our manufacturing in the chemical business in Gujarat. And we have got that law changed, which would allow women workers to work in chemical factories. So I think there are ways in which we should push. The third thing, which we did through CII, in Punjab, under the succession law, the women could never be be eligible for succession of land. We have got that law changed. We worked in the northern region when I was there with the government of Punjab and got that changed. But I'd like to take 2-3 minutes of yours on some new ideas for the growth of the economy. Indian railway speed is about 25 kilometers an hour average. In China, it is 70 kilometers. And my understanding is if we can target to change the average speed of the railways, it would have an impact of 1% on our GDP. It will have a serious social and economic impact. It'll seriously change the regional imbalance. And my understanding is the problem is not in the rolling stock, but it is primarily in the signaling technology that we need. So if we can work very focused on this to target 70 kilometers, China is 80, Europe is about 200, America is about 80, and it will change the entire dynamics of our transportation and our
Logistics
supply
as well,
chain,
absolutely.
as well as social impact. The second point I would say, which I see as an industry, serious issues on HSN classification of raw materials. Thousands and thousands of crores of imports are taking place on the wrong number at lower duty, which they don't deserve. Now that also affects our competitiveness. So government has to sit down, seriously work, and it's not an easy task.
No, it isn't.
It's extremely complicated. But we have to bite the bullet. We need to work very, very seriously on that. The third suggestion I would make is about water. Now there is very good modular technology on desalination. We are now very strongly committed on renewable and green energy. Why should we not put up a lot of facilities on our coastline throughout the country, make governments like I know Gujarat, which is maximum use of water because of its chemical industry, create facilities of desalinated water with renewable energy. So the costs are low. Do it in a modular form. All the industrial estates, all large industrial factories, and all homes, a lot of water can be created. If we focus on that, create a scheme, maybe offer an incentive, or work on a certain basis to get our water resources augmented.
No, that's a very good idea. Actually, very good 3 ideas that you put on the table.
I'd like to give one more idea.
Okay, fine. Very quickly.
If you have the patience. I think
I have the patience, not sure about the time.
The major challenge in India today is the quality of our goods. If you look at my farmers, the major challenge is poor quality of fertilizers, pesticides, seeds. And it's not because of the manufacturers, because the way by the time they get into distribution. So I would propose a national grid for quality control. It could also take up analysis of chemicals coming in from abroad or being exported. If you create a national grid as an independent agency, almost like an election commission, I think there is a tremendous opportunity to ensure a tremendous scope in ensuring that only quality goods reach the consumer or our.
So that's another federal body. One was proposed there by CB, another here by Mr. Singhal. Let me come across to Aditya Ghosh as well. Ashish, I'll come back to you in just a second. Aditya, we're talking a lot about mobility. We're also talking about new sectors. Let's talk about aviation as well. And, you're now part of ACASA. And what we are seeing is that trouble and pain continues as far as the aviation sector is concerned, specific, of course, to specific airlines. But India is still short on capacity. What do you believe the budget or government policy can do? Forget the budget. What do you expect the government to do in this situation to try and ease some of the capacity constraints?
Thanks, Shirin. I think Shirin, some things are are very different now than what it used to be for the last 10, 15 years. Thanks to consolidation and what has happened, there is structurally a very positive environment around aviation now. There are 3, 4 players, primarily professionally run. So, whether it's the use of capacity, technology, it's got better. Second is that, like in any business, we continue to be in a highly supply constrained environment with economy growing at about 7%. For us to be able to keep up, we need 14, 15% addition capacity every year, which is not happening. But what could government do differently? Of course, there is one which we've been, talking about forever, which is around the fuel tax.
ATF,
Right?
but that has come down.
That has come down
across
to it,
different
and
states,
across
yes.
different states.
Yeah.
And I think what's also aiding the fact is that if you look at yield and the fare environment, there's an improvement versus last year.
Yeah.
This summer we saw an 11% improvement year over year. But I think where, the government can do more is actually making it easier for youngsters to get skilled in aviation related jobs, travel related jobs, because they are very expensive. Look at pilots, for instance.
Yeah.
There's a worldwide shortage. And when it takes 50, 60, 70 lakhs to become a pilot, where will affordable finance come from to be able to skill that? And there, I think we have the opportunity to not only skill for India, we have the opportunity to skill for the world.
Okay.
The second is related to this is there's a lot of ancillary industries around it,
Yeah.
which can lead to a lot of self-employment, not just jobs. There, I think affordable capital for SMEs, MSMEs, whether it is in tooling, whether it is in equipment manufacturing, services, etc. Today, affordable capital in India is 18, 20, 24%. Right? There, very specifically, if we could bring in affordable capital to create more self-employment as opposed to people looking for jobs, I think that's one significant thing. And the third is there are enough companies, and this is not just in travel and tourism, but across, where enough companies out of India who have the ability to build for the world. So if there was an incentive, and I'm not sure what, but if there was an incentive to encourage in the first few years, companies which are building from India for the world. I know we have a session on unicorns later. Just trainer wheels, for the first 4 or 5 years. And then once you reach at a certain stage, we started creating global brands. You pull off those trainer wheels. I think those are some of the things.
Well, if you are talking to unicorns later, I don't know why the expectation is that the government needs to do more. I think if you look at the unicorn success stories, we've just, one company that's a SaaS company now valued at almost $6 billion has had nothing to do with the government. They've been building out of Chennai and in the valley and building for the world.
And I think, Shirin, the only thing is, we are expecting those early stage companies out of India to compete on the in the world stage with the same shackles that are around businesses which have been around for 100 years. So in those initial years, some kind of a push, whether it is unshackling from certain requirements or some kind of a push, I think that will help Indian companies reach at the world stage what Israel has done, what China has done, what Silicon Valley has done. I think we have a great opportunity there.
Well, Devjani Ghosh, I can spot you there. So let's talk about this big opportunity, and let's also talk about this opportunity in the context of AI, the emergence of AI, and the possibility of what AI is going to mean for India and for the Indian startup ecosystem, for Indian tech.
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, Shireen, I don't think this is going to be a budget issue or something that the budget will resolve.
They have been signaling the focus
I
on
think
technology and AI.
It's the signaling that becomes very important. I think the biggest challenge, frankly, if you think overall tech, it is how do you move up the innovation and R&D value chain? India has to, for many reasons. And I think that's where the support is needed, whether it is capability development or incentives to do more R&D in India or for the world, etc. I think as we talk about ease of doing business, we also have to talk about ease of innovation and ease of R&D in India. And I think those signals are going to be very important. As far as AI is concerned, would love to see AI mission becoming active. We have to invest, and we have to invest really fast, not just in compute, but unlocking the data, building the use cases, building the capabilities. I think all of this, there has to be a mission mode urgency that
Okay.
needs to come in. That's going
Okay.
to be critical. But the one thing that we do have called out to government, which I think is extremely critical, is the need for patient capital in India for deep tech. That's the area that we
And you
are
believe the
most,
government should fund or
they
support?
have to play a role, because if you think about it, today more than 90% of deep tech capital coming into India is outside India.
Yeah.
Most of these companies, either they have to flip at some point. It's very difficult for these startups to build for India at scale. So there was a 77% decline in funding, in
Yeah.
deep tech funding,
Yeah.
year over year. I think this is an area like other countries do, like US does, like many other countries do. Government has to invest. And there's a deep tech policy which is awaiting approval.
Yeah.
The best we can hope for is we get the signal that that's going to be active very soon.
Okay, well, we'll wait to see if the budget signals that that activation or not. But I can see Bharat Puri here as well. Mr. Puri, let me come to you now. Since we're talking about mood across industry and confidence in terms of demand, etc. What about cost pressures? What about input costs? What we are seeing across different sectors? Some sectors are hiking prices. Some sectors are actually cutting prices. We've seen SUV makers cut prices. We've seen paint makers hike prices. We've seen insurance companies hike prices as well. So what's the outlook now in terms of cost pressures, etc. at this point in time?
See, what is very clear, Shireen, is we now live in this geopolitically, what I would say, geopolitically unstable world where things keep changing at a rapid pace. As of now, speaking from a consumer goods perspective, the environment is by and large benign. You are getting a little impacted by the Red Sea, and first signs of inflation are coming on, but it is also clear that China manufacturing is back. So it does appear, barring any black swan events, the environment from a cost perspective will remain benign. I think from consumer goods, our concern clearly has always been rural demand. Post-COVID, we have seen two phenomena. A, rural is consistently growing slower than urban. At times, it's not growing at all. If you look at all of the big FMCG fellows, their single issue is below 5% rural growth. And our simple thing is, can we put money into the hands of the consumer, both in the short and medium term, which structurally changes this?
So what's the expectation? Because, at the start of the program, we heard about how people are unwilling or hesitant to come back to the cities because of the free food program, etc. What is it that you would like the government then to do in this situation to try and balance things out, to try and drive consumption, but at the same time try and ensure that investment doesn't dry up?
See, in the short run, obviously there are enough economists, but it has to be putting money back in the hands of the consumer, whether it's via the PM's Kisan Yojana, so on and so forth. In the medium term, it has to be employment and income being generated in these areas, which, therefore creates a circular economy. But as I said, there are enough smart economists who can do that.
And there is a meeting that the economists are having with the Prime Minister this afternoon. But Anshuman Magazine, a quick question on the real estate sector, because this has been the big focus area. It's also been a sector that's seen a big revival. The first decision of the cabinet was to announce 3 crore additional homes as part of the PM Aviation Yojana. What's the expectation? Do you believe that more is likely to be put on the table to drive this sector, given its multiplier impact?
Yeah, hopefully. I think the key thing is how to make cost of money lower for both consumers and the developers, because right now there is a big shortage. If you look at it, just like high-end cars, in the residential sector, it's really luxury which is being targeted. So they need to reduce mortgage rates to some extent for affordable housing, change the affordable housing definition, and for developers to give them enough input. And this could be reducing cost of cement, steel, the taxes on it, and other incentives for them to really go into low-cost housing. The other one, which is very key, is that the cost of land is going up, which is a red flag as far as I'm concerned. So this is not only for real estate. If you want to go after manufacturing, healthcare, hospitality, whatever we do, the land is the key for everything. And the cost is going up, and the only thing government can do is really focused infrastructure development. So there's more land release for doing everything. Manufacturing, everybody mentioned, is a huge one. And also employment. I think we need to go beyond and look at where the employment is being generated: retail, healthcare, logistics, hospitality. Huge opportunity for going after that in the budget for addressing the employment part of the economy.
Yes, I think that, yes, you wanted to make a point on construction and housing. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, just to add to what Anshuman said, I think the fact that the incentive for housing of 3 crore housing is there is an excellent start of the government. But one of the areas which we've seen doing well is the luxury housing. The big focus for us is actually the fact that we need to get middle income and poor housing, because 50% of our cities are slums. And I think some of the incentives needed there is finance availability, because there is a finance shortage and restrictions of RBI. And the fact that we don't have a tax incentive which used to be there, if some sort of incentive could come in.
Okay, so incentives to promote affordable housing
side.
on the housing side.
And on the non-residential side, the one scheme which the government has bought is the REIT InvIT, which has actually started off really well. One of the incentives or the issues which we've been raising the government is to bring it on par with equities, because it's not yet classified as equity. And there are subsequent issues, which is why we're not seeing the sector
Well,
grow as much.
this issue of parity is across different asset classes at this point in time. And in some quarters, the hope is that the government addresses it. In some quarters, the hope is it will spoil the party. Don't go anywhere close to it. So we don't know which way the finance minister will move. Ashish, a quick word from you on what you believe the priorities need to be.
Look, I'll do my best to give a quick word. First on infrastructure spending. There was a talk earlier about 30% increase in budgets. Very good suggestion. Do that. Keep things simple. Let the network effects take over and the economy will continue to do well. Second, taking off of what Nikhil was talking about, using energy as a place where to reinvigorate manufacturing. The government's doing its bit. I think the industry needs to do a lot more as well, especially where R&D is considered in new energy, which is not a budget topic, but in all the PLIs for electrolyzers as it's looked at, there's not single one with homegrown Indian technology being looked at. Here, we're still looking at foreign collaborations.
Right.
That can only get us that far. And third, as I was just discussing with Sunil, there's real dearth of labor right now, especially for civil construction. Salil was talking about getting more women, but I think women need to come in, not just on the shop floor, everywhere. They need to show up here.
This is the dilemma, isn't it? On one hand, we're talking about not having enough jobs. On the other hand, industry is talking about the fact that there are not enough people that have the requisite skills to be employed. So this is a dilemma that we're dealing with. Sunil, you wanted to come in on that as well?
So I would agree completely with what Ashish has said on all the angles. I think the challenge is not getting people, it's getting people who are trained. And I think that is where much more needs to be done in the area of skilling. I think as we move towards the government's vision of increasing the share of manufacturing from 15% to 25%, this is not going to happen just by skilling people. We're talking about $1.5 trillion of capex coming in the next couple of years if we've got to get to the 25% vision target. And the only way this can happen is through technology. And smart infrastructure, smart manufacturing is going to be absolutely critical for that. And everything that goes around it as well. With the infrastructure, and I agree completely with what was said earlier on in terms of increasing the share in infrastructure. Vinayak's point is absolutely right. The lease that we are looking at is around 13 lakh crores over there. And the same thing in terms of manufacturing. We need to get much more into the area of smart manufacturing if we have to achieve that. Skilling will be a third one, of course. The energy transition and the entire thing that goes around the energy transmission, distribution of the energy network is going to be critical. We are not yet there. The entire transmission network has to be doubled in the next couple of years. The distribution network has not yet been resolved in the states. So these are a couple of the key issues that will need to be addressed.
We've got the last few minutes, so let me get a quick show of hands here and do a quick dipstick. What I'm hearing, and this is to my mind not entirely surprising, but I think the sense of urgency and the distress that I'm sensing in this room on that issue has certainly surprised me. Would you say that lack of skilled workforce is amongst your top concerns, your top risks as a CEO today? Those of you who believe that it's amongst your top 3 or top 5 concerns, if you could raise your hands, please. Okay. That's less than half the room, but clearly it is an important area of concern. A quick follow-up question now. How many of you believe that we're going to be able to do, and the CII projection or expectation or forecast is more than 8% growth for FY25? How many of you believe we'll do more than 8% in FY25? Not too many. Okay. How many of you believe that the RBI is going to cut interest rates this year? Okay, again, not too many. And finally, let me ask you in terms of private capex as well as investment, how many of you are likely to put in fresh capacity, add capacity in FY25? Well, that's a positive note to end this conversation on. A strong show of hands coming in here from industry. I hope you do actually deliver on that, and I would imagine that we are going to see the impact of that play out over the next few quarters. But ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've covered a whole host of sectors and a lot of ground here on what it means for the Indian economy to try and drive competitiveness, what it means for the government, but more importantly, how both industry and government can work together to address some of the key concerns that constrain us, but also some of the big opportunities that we as a nation are hoping to capitalize on. Thank you very much for being part of the CNBC TV 18 CII Budget Town Hall. We will see you again on the 23rd of July to see how much of what we've discussed here is finally taken forward by the Finance Minister when she presents her 7th budget. Thank you very, very much for joining us here on this special. Thank you, Mr. Puri, Mr. Pukundan, and CB for facilitating this. Appreciate your time and have a very good rest of your National Council. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you.